everybody, it's Katie McKelvin, the Director of Louisiana Fosters. I'm here with Anna Palmer. She is the Executive Director of Crossroads NOLA and also a foster and adoptive parent. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to jump right in, and the first question I want to ask is, what brought you to Crossroads NOLA?
Well, that's a really kind of long and winding road. So I actually grew up in Georgia, and my husband and I moved to New Orleans to go to grad school. And, we really just fell in love with the city. And, part of what we loved about the city was just the culture, but also like there was so many opportunities for us to serve others. Mm-hmm. And through our work, we actually both worked at a local church in New Orleans. I actually became exposed to the need that there was a need for foster parents in our city. And, previously my husband had actually adopted our first son internationally, and we didn't really know about the needs right here in our own city, in our own state. Mm-hmm. So when we became aware of that need through my work at the church, I realized, this work of caring for kids in our community is something that the church needs to be involved with. So I immediately in that role, started to get some wheels moving on some things and to really just let people know, because really my job at the church at that time was to be aware of needs in the community and mobilize the church to meet those needs where we could do so. Nice. And so I knew that if I wasn't aware of this need, there was no way that the people in our church were aware of this need. So as we began to talk to folks in our congregation about it, we had several people step up and say, we want to serve children and families in this way. And it was a pretty easy sell because, as people who follow Jesus, he's pretty clear about where we should stand on these things and what our actions should be related to those things. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot of people step up and say, this is what we feel like how we're supposed to serve is to foster. So that was really a church-based ministry that over time we really saw, the need in our city and the need in our state is really beyond just what one local church and one congregation could do. And so we really transitioned that church-based ministry from kind of this small little in-house thing to a nonprofit. And that gave us the ability really to partner with the state agency at a higher level and to bring other churches along in that process. So at Crossroads, we now have over 60 church partners that we work with to recruit new foster families and to host, a variety of events for those families to serve them. And so that's really kind of how we got started, was just taking one step after the other and starting from that small, just in our church and realizing okay, what do we need to do beyond this to really meet the need?
Wow, yeah. So in that time, y'all became foster parents too.
We did, yes. So my husband and I, it's funny because I recruited foster parents before I ever became one. Yeah. But one of the things we know about fostering is that it's not for everybody, and for some people it's for them, but maybe not at that time. And so for the first couple of years that Crossroads was in existence and we were recruiting foster families, my family just really, the time wasn't right for us. But eventually we got there. My oldest son got a little older and we felt like he could better understand what foster care was about. And so that was important, an important thing for our family to make sure he really understood if we took this step, what it was going to be like. Mm-hmm. So my husband and I became foster parents, and we, the little boy who became our son was placed with us at the age of 4, and at the age of 5, we adopted him. And so my boys are now 12 and 10, so we have a lot of fun. I tell people all the time, I love to have a to-do list, but it often comes to a halt because there's some kind of ball I need to throw or kick or chase or something with my boys. They have so much energy. But yeah, being a foster parent is truly has been one of the biggest blessings of our lives. Wow.
So we talked a little bit about how Crossroads NOLA became Crossroads NOLA. But let's transition a little bit and talk about TBRI and y'all's place with that and how that came to be.
Sure. So we realized really early on that the kids that entered foster care, obviously through no fault of their own, had experienced trauma in one way or another. And even entering foster care itself is a traumatic experience. And because of that, these kids had needs and behaviors that a lot of times foster parents weren't really equipped or understood how to handle. And so trust-based relational intervention, or TBRI, really became the tool that we saw as something that we could give foster families as a way to help the children in their home heal. And so we love it because it's not a clinical model, so you don't have to be a therapist or a clinician, and I don't have a clinical bone in my body. But it's designed for caregivers, so that could be anyone from a foster parent to a teacher, and anyone really who's making decisions on behalf of children, to really understand how trauma has impacted that child. And we know from science that it impacts, we just a lot of times see behaviors and we go, we gotta fix this behavior. But what's under those behaviors is that trauma has affected the child's brain, their body, their biology, and their beliefs. And all of those things play into the behavior. So TBRI really teaches parents, like, how do I look at all of those things under the surface? And how do I correct and get this child back on the right developmental trajectory so that I can build their capacity for behaviors that are more helpful and appropriate for them when they're in a safe family, which our foster families are. And so really it was about giving foster families the tools to help kids.
Yeah, and so we've transitioned just from Crossroads NOLA with TBRI to it being a statewide initiative. So how did that happen? How did that transition happen?
Yeah, so, I think anytime anyone saw me coming for a long time, they're like, oh, here comes that TBRI girl. And the reason I really believe in it is because and the reason I was willing just to beat that drum over and over is because I saw what it did in the life of my family, and I saw what it was doing for kids that were in our foster families. And so it really is a way too, we know that we don't have enough mental health professionals to really provide all the mental health services that we need really across the state. And what TBRI does is it takes the people who are already in the lives of these kids and it gives them knowledge and skills that they can really help children heal. So it doesn't do away with clinical services, but it's just this really incredible way to expand that capacity. So we reached out to DCFS and said essentially like, hey, we think this is something that's important, and they agreed. And so from there, we started to kind of take the partnership one step at a time and really figure out how do we get this to the people who are boots on the ground working with kids, whether that's foster families or bio families or caseworkers. And so it's still a work in progress for sure. It's funny when occasionally someone will ask me, so who needs TBRI? And when I tell them, they say, oh, so you mean everybody? And I'm like, yep, everybody.
If you work with a child or you even see a child on a daily basis, TBRI is going to be useful for you.
Exactly. And decision makers too, right? So even if you're the person that's in an office doing the paperwork, making the big decisions on what happens with kids and families, those decisions need to be run through that trauma-informed lens as well, with that understanding of what do kids who've experienced trauma really need. Yeah,
I was just thinking, like, it just flips the lens on how we approach anything when we're working in this environment and just working with people in general. It's just such a grace-filled way to speak and to be in the presence of anybody, and so it's effective for everybody, but really, really effective for kids who've been in hard situations from hard places.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how has Louisiana Fosters furthered your mission?
So Louisiana Fosters has really been just a great connection point for us. So we are really at Crossroads big believers in collaborative partnerships. And we know that there's plenty of work in this space to go around, and we need all types of people and all types of organizations to really be involved. And so Louisiana Fosters has really been an opportunity not only for us to share our work with others, but for us to connect with people across the state who are doing similar work. I love to learn from other people, especially learn from their mistakes so I don't have to make them myself. And so just being able to hear from other people what their wins have been, what their challenges have been, and just that opportunity to connect. So I think the other thing is it's really allowed for the child welfare space to be more in public view. And I think a lot of times, just because of the nature of child welfare, there's a lot of good reasons for, for it not to have a lot of publicity. But the flip side of that coin is people can't help if they don't know what the needs are and what the challenges are. And so by Louisiana Fosters being this platform that brings awareness has definitely helped elevate our work, but also the work of our partners across the state. So that's been really helpful.
Awesome. So what do you tell people when they ask you what they can do? Because I'm sure you get that a lot.
I do, yeah. So we think about this at Crossroads in two ways. So the first way you can help is you can be a person who is a healthy, connected relationship for a child and family. So that's a foster parent, right? Or that's a mentor. So you can be that healthy, connected relationship, which is really the foundation of what all children and families need. And if that's not you, then what we want you to do is figure out how can I create capacity for those people, right? If our children's greatest need is that connected, healthy relationship, and that's not me, then I need to be creating space for someone else to really be able to pour into that deeply. So that can be something very simple like taking a meal to a foster family. So I know we have one foster family in our network that has a member of their church that brings them a meal every Thursday night. Yeah. And that's just their way of saying, you're pouring deeply into these kids, and one night a week, you don't even have to think about dinner. And while that may seem like a small thing, to have that extra brain space, right, where I don't have to come in from work and figure out what's for dinner tonight and then spend the time prepping it, right, is just a way that that this church member has really created capacity for that foster family to do their job even better. So it could be that. It could be you're the person that they call at 10 p.m. when they get a new placement and they're set up for a 2-year-old child, but a 4-year-old shows up, right? They're the person they can call and say like, oh, I need little boy pajamas and like, whatever it is. So it's all about so that in that moment, that foster family can spend those first few hours really connecting with and making the child feel safe and comfortable and not running around trying to gather the right supplies for the child that's come into their home. So the list of things that people can do is really endless, right? So we really just encourage people to think about what can you do to create capacity for someone who is fostering or who is involved in that relationship with that child.
Yeah, and I've said it before, but I'll say it again. We're not asking people to do something they don't already know how to do.
Right.
We're like be creative with the things that you have and the gifts that you have in your life to pour into these families.
Yeah, that's a great point. So for example, like no one wants me bringing them dinner every Thursday night. That's not my forte. But there are other things I can do. Right. And so yeah, just thinking about what are the things that you already, I know I have a friend who she loves to like throw parties and decorate and like make things super cute, so that's something that she's done for families who, sometimes a family will have a child, they'll welcome a child into their home and they'll realize their birthday is next week, right? So having people who can say, hey, I can throw together an awesome birthday party, last minute, that's incredible. That's a great way to serve.
Yeah, and also very important.
Right, absolutely.
Sure. So what do you want to see for your organization for the future?
Yeah, so I think that list could go on and on, but I think for the future, what we want to see continue to happen is for foster families to come to us not with just the passion and the love to care for kids, but really a willingness to provide what we would call trauma competent care. So to really, people who are willing to really take a deep look at what that means and how they might need to adjust their parenting style, which is not an easy thing to do, and I can say that firsthand, to really make sure that everything that happens when a child is in foster care is in that child's best interest. Because when a child is in foster care, they are the most vulnerable they're in the most vulnerable position they could be in, right? And so to make sure that we are working with our partners, we are all on the same page as far as how do we all work in the best interest of this child.
Right. And so my final question is, if money wasn't an object and you could do anything in this space, what would be your dream?
If money wasn't an object, wow, that's a hard place to imagine.
Right?
Goodness. If money wasn't an object, I mean, I think I would have, people across Louisiana who are replicating, the work that we've started in New Orleans. Not that it's perfect, because people are involved, so it's never going to be perfect. But just this idea of getting the word out and mobilizing people, because I think the thing that's really tricky about this question is that children who've experienced abuse or neglect or some other kind of trauma, throwing money at it doesn't fix it.
It doesn't.
But people are what can help these children heal. And so I would want to figure out, I would want to do whatever needed to be done to mobilize enough people to help all the children in Louisiana who needed it.
That's so good. Well, thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
It was wonderful.